This is King Henry VIII. You've probably heard of him. And this is King Charles III. You've probably heard of him too. One is famous for having 6 wives, beheading 2 of those, breaking away from the Catholic Church to form his own religion with him as head, and just generally ruling England with an iron fist. The other didn't do any of those things. Or not yet anyway. So how did England and the UK generally move from this to this? What are the powers of the monarch today, and what does this tell us about the UK constitution more generally? The UK is understood today as what is known as a constitutional monarchy. This is a form of government in which a monarch acts as head of state within the parameters of the constitution. They are part of the constitution, not above or beyond it. A constitutional monarchy differs from an absolute monarchy in that an absolute monarch serves as the sole source of political power in the state and is not legally bound by any constitution. They are above and beyond the constitution. We could start this story all the way back at Magna Carta in 1215, but that would make this video too long. Also, the significance of Magna Carta is largely overstated. Its value lies more in its symbolism, which it came to represent centuries later, starting with the lead up to the civil wars in the 1600s, and then later with the US founding fathers. So we will start our story at this English Civil War instead. Now, this video should come with a health warning. As an Irish person, I have a particular perspective on British history, not just the Civil War. Just mention the name Oliver Cromwell in Ireland and you'll see what response you get. Also, I'm not a historian, I'm a lawyer, and really any short video on decades, if not centuries of history is going to have to make a lot of simplifications. If you're interested in learning more about this period, I've included a link to some great podcasts in the description below, along with some other books which you may find helpful. It's also important to note that it wasn't just an English civil war. It involved Scotland and Ireland too. This is one of the reasons why people often talk of civil wars, not just war. There are several causes to the English Civil War. A key aspect to it concerned the religious conflict in a post-Reformation Britain. And when your political system is predicated upon a belief that the king is appointed by God, you're going to get in trouble when no one can actually agree what God says. For our purposes, we can think of the Civil War as a clash between Parliament in Westminster and the Crown. Specifically, did King Charles I have the power to do certain things without the prior approval of Parliament? Taxation was central to this, with the House of Commons originally attempting to grant the new King Charles taxation revenues known as tonnage and poundage for 12 months only, rather than for the duration of his entire reign, as was the tradition. Charles continued to collect the tax regardless, as well as trying to raise money without Parliament through a forced loan, with imprisonment as sanction for non-payment. In 1628, the House of Commons drafted the Petition of Right, which claimed, amongst other things, that taxation without parliamentary consent was illegal, as was arbitrary imprisonment. An outraged Charles I prorogued Parliament for 11 years and governed via his personal rule instead. In order to raise money without Parliament, he resorted to various different measures, including, controversially, ship money, which was a levy to fund the navy, which was traditionally imposed on ports, but then he extended it to inland towns. As if one fight wasn't enough, Charles I also thought it would be a great idea to impose the Book of Common Prayer on churches across Britain, which provoked fierce opposition, particularly across Scotland. So key to the Civil War therefore was about religion and the extent to which the king could govern without parliamentary approval. To cut a long story short, Charles lost, and the Civil War ultimately ended with the execution of Charles I on the 30th of January 1649. This execution followed a trial established by what was known as the Rump Parliament. This parliament contained only members who remained following Pride's Purge in 1648, when the army removed all members who were opposed to trying the king for high treason. This is important because it meant that accusations of illegitimacy always followed both the trial and the Rump Parliament for as long as it remained in session. For the next decade, England experimented with various forms of republican government, with Oliver Cromwell, an MP and key military campaigner during the Civil War, ruling as Lord Protector from 1653. In this time, the more extreme members of the army were purged, such as the Levellers, who argued for the radical idea of universal manhood suffrage, that every man, not woman, should have a vote regardless of whether they own property or not. Oh, and a little ethnic cleansing of Catholics in Ireland also took place. Upon Cromwell's death, however, his son briefly assumed the protectorate but resigned due to a lack of a political support base and, crucially, a lack of support from the army. Parliament eventually agreed that Charles I's son, Charles II, could return to the crown under a restored monarchy. However, trouble was brewing again, as it was increasingly looking like Charles II would die without an heir, meaning that his Catholic brother James II would inherit the throne. Charles II repeatedly refused to engage with the parliamentarians who wished for him to alter the line of succession in favour of James's daughter Mary, who was married to the Dutch Protestant Prince William of Orange. When the Catholic James II acceded to the throne, it was initially hoped by many parliamentarians that his reign would be brief. In his short time on the throne, James managed to provoke the ire even further by calling for religious toleration, which was once again seen as a way of re-establishing Catholicism, and also by seeking to remove the anti-Catholic penal laws. Meanwhile, the Crown's army in Ireland was becoming ever increasingly Catholic. But the final straw came in 1688 when James's wife gave birth to a son, raising the possibility of an eternal Catholic succession, and so Parliament invited the Dutch Prince William of Orange to come to England to protect its rights, and he landed with an invasion force on the 5th of November 1688. James's army in England suffered some major defections, and so no major battle ever took place. Instead, he fled to France. Parliament duly declared that James had vacated his throne, and so they claimed to invite William of Orange to fill the power vacuum in a joint monarchy with his wife Mary. Now, the reason this is often referred to as the Glorious Revolution is the claim that it was achieved with little to no violence at all, and indeed no decisive battle took place in England. But this is not the entire story. James eventually landed in Ireland, where he sought to rally his Catholic base, and in 1690 and 1691 two decisive battles were fought. The first, the Battle of the Boyne, occurred on the 1st of July 1690, and the second, the Battle of Aughrim, occurred on the 12th of July 1691. This is the bloodiest battle ever fought in Ireland or Britain, with over 7,000 killed, and Protestants in Northern Ireland still celebrate the 12th of July to this day. So the idea that this glorious revolution was bloodless is simply untrue. It's a great example of constitutional myth-making, or the important symbolic role constitutions play and the stories we tell ourselves. So too is the framing of this as a revolution rather than an invasion by the Dutch, and to this day you will still hear people claim that Britain has never been invaded since 1066. Back to constitutional issues. When Parliament invited William and Mary to take the throne, they also had to agree to the passage of the Bill of Rights 1689. This made William and Mary joint monarchs and reasserts, amongst other things, Parliament's right to sit regularly, the right to free and fair elections, and parliamentary privilege. It also makes clear that there can be no taxation without parliamentary approval, that the monarchy cannot suspend parts of legislation, and that the monarch cannot keep a standing army in peacetime without parliamentary approval. The Bill of Rights 1689 is still in force today. To cap it all, in 1701, Parliament passed the Act of Succession, stating that the crown could only pass to Protestant descendants. Fundamentally, this established the precedent that Parliament could intervene to alter the right of succession to the throne. So in conclusion, after several decades of civil war, constitutional experimentation and muddling through, the English Parliament eventually emerged as the clear centre of political and legal power in the Constitution. Now I say England here because while England, Scotland and the administration in Ireland had the same king, they were not united in the same state. How these different states became one is the subject of another video in this series, which I'll cover when discussing devolution. But one power which the monarch did return was the ability to grant or refuse royal assent to a bill. Essentially, this works like a veto, but this power to refuse royal assent hasn't been exercised in over 300 years. And in the next video, we're going to discuss why this is the case, as it points to a pivotal source of constitutional rules in the United Kingdom: political conventions.